Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Monday, February 20th. Today is President's Day. That's where they put together George Washington and Abraham Lincoln's birthday, right?
Well, yeah, and just recognizing all presidents.
All right, here's Larry Brown. Good to have you here, Larry.
And their precedents.
Yes. And Larry Brown has a story today dealing with President's Day. And is it the 14th Amendment?
It's the 14th Amendment, and I'll talk about how presidents have played a role in the interpretation of the 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment is, explain what the 14th Amendment is.
Well, the 14th Amendment is the constitutional amendment that defines who gets to be a citizen of the United States. Talks about birth and naturalization and those processes. Yeah.
All right, so here is Larry Brown with his President's Day story.
It was in the fall of 1895 that a Chinese-American young man by the name of Wong Kim Ark was refused entry into the United States. Now, he had been to China and back once before and was okay, but this time on his second trip back, he was denied entry by a customs agent by the name of John Wise, whom we know might have had some issues with Chinese immigrants. Well, what resulted was that here was Wong Kim Ark stuck on this ship. The Coptic was the name of the ship, and for 4 months he was passed back and forth from ship to ship while they were deciding his fate, which had separated him from his wife and from his children and his job as a cook. Now, to put this in context, this was in the era of Chinese exclusion. Going back to the Act of 1882, which was limiting how many Chinese could come into the United States, there had been certainly a contribution of Chinese to the American economy. They were significant in mining and railroads, but there was an economic downturn in 1873, which then other labor put pressure to get the Chinese out. And there were acts of violence and racism, and we didn't want Chinese. You know, we wanted them for labor, and now we didn't want them and didn't need them. And particularly children were targeted because they didn't want the Chinese population in the United States to grow. Well, little did Wong Kim Ark know that he was going to get caught up in this whole environment. Now, his parents had been immigrants to the United States and in fact were merchants in Chinatown in San Francisco. But after that economic downturn, they chose to go back to the United States, taking their, at that time, 9-year-old son. Well, in 1890, he came back to the United States and then was considered by the language of that day an accidental citizen because he was born in the United States. He married and had a child and had taken this additional trip, 1894 and 1895, and it was on this return trip that he caught up in this whole situation. Now, little did he know that he was going to become a test case for what it means to be a citizen of the United States. Well, he believed that he was guaranteed citizenship by what's called the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment, which says if you're born in the United States, you get to be a citizen. But that was being challenged. Now, a lawyer in San Francisco by the name of George Collins took up his case, went to the U.S. District Attorney, got a district attorney to put it into the court, and the district court ruled in favor and said he was a citizen. But the Justice Department appealed that decision, which took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and it wound up taking another 3 years to work out this decision. Now, a little bit of background. The 14th Amendment was a sort of a package of, say, 3 constitutional amendments that came during the Civil War and right after the Civil War in the Reconstruction era. The 13th Amendment had abolished slavery. The 15th Amendment had said the right to vote cannot be denied by race. Now, of course, at that time we were talking only about men. The 14th Amendment then was really put originally into place by, some of you may recall, the sort of radical Republican floor leader Thaddeus Stevens, who in 1866 put together this proposition saying that born or naturalized, citizens should have equal rights, and the children born to people under the jurisdiction of the United States would have the right of citizenship. Well, eventually that became the amendment. Now, there's been lots of attempts to modify and change it. Things tend to change based on the attitude of the public and the decisions of presidents. And that's where we begin to talk about this situation. Now, the Supreme Court ruled in favor, eventually, of Wong Kim Ark. And on March 28, 1898, on a 6-2 vote, he was given the right of citizenship, sort of what we now talk about as birthright. Now, at that time, that was the only way that Chinese could become citizens, because at that time, naturalization was not allowed for Chinese. So birthright was the only way they could become citizens. Now, he later went back to China. We know very little about the rest of his life, but we do know that one son tried to come back to the United States and was denied entry because they questioned whether or not he was really Wong Kim Ark's son. Other sons came later, and I think it was 3. The youngest of the sons came back, was actually drafted in World War II, and wound up becoming a career merchant marine. Well, presidents have played a role, because sometimes, you know, it may be public attitude, it may be economic or political relationships with country of origins, but sometimes it's presidential executive decisions that determine how that's being defined. Now, in March of 1998, the city of San Francisco declared it Wong Kim Ark Day. But originally, in 1898, it didn't make the news. It was one paragraph, because that was the same day that the Naval Board of Inquiry had decided that the USS Maine had been blown up by a mine in the port of Havana, and war with Spain was impending, so that news got kind of lost. But we can say today that it was a landmark decision. But we can also say today the debate goes on.
And on. And on.
Yes.
All right, Larry, that's a bit of an interesting history, and all of that was true.
All of it, yes.
All is true.
This is historical record.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, there are Latin, of course, official languages. Jus soli means the right of land, and jus sanguini means the right of blood. The 14th Amendment says either one.
Yeah.
Either one.
All right, so if you're born here, right now the law is even if your parents are not U.S. citizens, if they are here and you are born on U.S. territory.
Under the jurisdiction of the U.S., and that's the question we argue today.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Larry Brown. If you'd like more information about Larry Brown, any of his stories or songs, they're available where?
brownstory.com website, or you can contact me, brownstory@hotmail.com.
Okay, Larry Brown, it's always a pleasure to have you here. We're out of time for today. Drop me an email if there is something you would like to hear or see. I want to hear from you. That email address is pepperp@missouri.edu. We'll see you tomorrow morning.